So those of you that have been coming to Wednesday night classes, what are we studying? Revelations. And today's message is entitled, what is it? What is it entitled? Remnant Health. All right. Now I will confess that we're going to do more remnant than health today. Is that okay? All right. So remnant health in Revelation. So if I come to you and I say, alas, alas, Katie, alas, what does that mean to you? What does the word alas means? Huh? What? So the dictionary defines alas as an expression of something fearful, an expression of sorrow, grief, pity, and apprehension of evil. So when we read alas in the Bible, you have to put it in that context. Now, if I were to tell you blisters, skin, sores, if I were to say thunder, lightning, heavy downpour, falling, bruising, explosions, open gashes, collisions, falling staircases, running to the emergency room, what would you say? Huh? Not a good day. What? Alas. Alas. Well, Andrew and Rochelle are not here, but those were our first 2 days in Florida. Blistering, itchy skin, explosions with gashes on the skin, running to the emergency room, downpour, wet leaves, falling, bruising, contusions, stair walkways collapsing before you get to the airplane. That was our visit to Florida, ASI. Welcome to ASI, Florida. So, is the devil out there as a roaring lion, looking for who to feast on? Indeed. Now, I will spare you the details, and perhaps maybe others will share those details with you, but I will spare that with you. I will spare that today. But as I was reflecting on ASI, I was thinking, well, okay, wow, what did we get out of ASI, and what was it about? And I must say, it was a challenge. We did encounter a few difficulties in running to the emergency room. I heard a variety of speakers, but most of all, I was humbled by the work that's being done out there. People throwing themselves in mission work, whether it's helping in refugee camps or water wells or schooling or agriculture or spreading the word. I was humbled by that, and I asked myself, how little am I doing sitting here in the comfort that we live in today? But there's so much need out there. There's so much need. And so as I was thinking about today's message, and I was praying and asking the Lord, how do we mesh these two things together? Then it came to me that as we think of the health message, there has to be a purpose for it. The health message. It's not just about being healthy. It's not just about saying, I'm going to live to 100, or I'm going to have less risk of a heart attack or a stroke. It's because we have a work to do as the Remnant Church. And so we have a work to do, and so we have to ask ourselves, what is it that it is? What is this work that I have to do? And what is my part? Because we don't all do the same work, right? We have individual things we have to do. And so as I asked myself that, I came across this quote, and it says, I saw that many were sickly among the remnant. So who was sickly? Well, huh? Many of the remnant. So I saw that many were sickly among the remnant, who have made themselves so by indulging their appetites. If we wish good health, we must take special care of the health that God has given us. The health reform I was shown is a part of the third angel's message and is just as closely connected with it as are the arm and the hand with the human body. So, can we do without our hands and arms? I mean, we can get by, but can we be functional? As functional? No. And so, as we merge these two together, then I think it's worth a pause and ask ourselves, well, let's review this remnant message. Let's review this three angels message. So some of you that are a little bit older, do you recognize this? Yes. It's behind me here. Do you see it behind me? So what is this? What is that? What does it mean? What is it about? Three angels message, right? And so we have to ask ourselves, if we are Seventh-day Adventist, if we believe that their Bible says that there has to be a remnant people, then wouldn't it behoove us to know what this message is and how we can best spread it? Right? And so we have to think about that, and we have to say, okay, let's get this message out. So now I want you to go with me to the book of Revelations, and let's go ahead and open chapter 14. And I'm going to read through a few verses. I want you to follow with me. Chapter 14. And I'm going to go to verse 6. And I saw an angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwelleth on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people. So who is this message for? Everyone. Everyone. Is there an exception? We can't go to that part over there. No. Saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his what? Is come. And worship him that made heaven and earth, the sea, and the fountains of waters. So let's pause there for a second. So, there's a message sent out for the whole world to hear, regardless of where you're from, regardless of what your language is, regardless of what your people are. There's a message to be heard, and this message encompasses some very specific things, because it says here that we have to fear God, or be in awe of God, or honor God, right? Because, why? What is it coming? There's a judgment coming. And it says, worship him that made heaven and earth and sea and the fountains of water. What is the implication there? Huh? So the implication there is that there's a possibility that we can worship something else, right? And so if we're going to take these steps and we're going to say, okay, I want to be a remnant people, I want to be an end time people, I want to know what God wants, then we have to pause and say, am I worshiping the right God? Am I worshiping the right God? And of course, this wording, this context here takes us to the very beginning of the Bible, because we have God who is the creator, right? The creator. And so it points us back to God the Creator. And it points us back to God who formed us and gave us light. And gave us a union with a special person. And gave us dominion. And he gave us a Sabbath to rest. Right? And so it points us back to understand, who am I worshiping? Who am I worshiping? Now, verse 8, and there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Now, for those of you that have been in the class, and we talked about these things, and we say that illicit relationships, as it refers to women in the Bible, means illicit relationships in what? Churches, right? And so that implies that the doctrines might be a little bit confused or mixed, right? Or not correct. And wine referring to the doctrines. So this is a doctrine that is not what? Pure, right? And so we have to understand that, and we have to say, well, is my doctrine sound? Or do we do like some preachers that I've heard out there that say, don't worry about it. When we get to heaven, God will tell us what the doctrine is. Is that biblical? No. And so we ask ourselves, well, who is this Babylon? Who is this Babylon? We have to understand it. Now, if we go back to the dictionary and we ask, well, what is this Babylon? Well, of course, Babel, the tower. Who remembers the Tower of Babel? Tower of Babel. So Babel means confusion, disorder. Now, Babylonian would mean, and I omitted the first one, but Babylonian would mean that from Babylon. But the second definition is tumultuous and disorderly. And so if right here in the Bible we're talking about Babylon, and the definition of Babylon is confusion, disorder, tumultuousness, then we know that this wine or this doctrine that is in there is a doctrine that can only lead us to be what? Confused, disorganized, tumultuous, right? And so I have had people come up to me and say, well, how do you know what Babylon they're talking about? What Babylon are we talking about? Huh? Is it the original Babylon in the desert? No? So I decided to skip all the controversies, and I just went to Catholic.com, Finding Babylon, and they say this. The book of Revelation uses Babylon to refer to Rome 6 times. Ditto for the first century apocryphal books and the Apocalypse of Baruch. Even the Sibylline oracles, which were written in Greek from the 2nd century BC through the 2nd century AD, refer to Rome as Babylon. And so we can bypass the controversy and we can say, you know what? Babylon, as it refers to the New Testament, as Peter referred to it, as John is writing about, Babylon represents this area that we know of. Now, I put here this interesting painting of what Babylon is supposed to be in its splendor, and the hanging gardens, and the gods, and the elephants, and the winged lions. But what do you see? What do you see back here in the background? Now, when Nebuchadnezzar was ruling here and walking through these gardens, looking at how wonderful his constructions were, was that there? Huh? No. Right? It wasn't. Right? Now, why the fascination of the Tower of Babel? Is human nature constantly trying to, through Satan's influence, trying to take us over to confusion and disorganization? Now, this is an old painting, but I want to take you to a new painting. Let me see here. Hold on one second. Is this working? Can I get the next slide? There you go. So this is a artist rendition, and I forget the date when they did this, but it was, I think, 1500s, something like that. And so 1500s, so only a few hundred years ago, there's still this fascination about Babylon. There's still this fascination about, can we be independent of God? Can we have our own doctrines? Can we have our own way of life? Now, of course, I brought this to modern era of the 1500s. That was just a few days ago, right, for us, compared to history. Now, how about this? What does this look like? Huh? So this is a modern rendition of an incomplete Tower of Babel, which just happens to be the European Parliament in Strasbourg, France. Now, could this be coincidence? Anybody want to raise your hand for coincidence? Huh? No? Well, let's look at their poster. This is the poster that they promoted for the European Union. Can you see what it says? What does it say there? Many tongues, but one voice. What was the original problem at the Tower of Babel? There was one language, and God said, you know what? You guys are just working too hard at evil here. And what happened at the Tower of Babel? It had to be separated, confused. The languages had to be confused so that people, and we read this with the antediluvians, they desired nothing but to do evil, right? And that's what Satan is driving. So even today, human nature, the way Satan drives things, still calls back to the ancient times. It calls back to confusion. It calls back to this polluted doctrine or wine that's there, and we see it in our politics, we see it in our religion. And so we have to think about that, and we have to pause, and we have to ask our questions. Here in verse 8, Babylon is fallen, because she made all nations drink the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Verse 9, and the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast or his image, and receive his mark on his forehead or his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, and he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and the presence of the Lamb. And so we see that there's this message that's brought forward, and the message begins with, we're giving the light to the world. We're giving the information. Everyone can hear it. No matter what your tongue, language, tribe, people, where you're hiding in the world, the message is there. But you have to be aware that there's a system that's fallen. There's a system that's been polluting the doctrines. And you have to be careful that you don't end up worshiping the wrong system, worshiping the wrong God. Who are you worshiping? That's the call. And the third phase of this is that there is a judgment to come. And so for those that sit there and say, you know, God is love and he's going to take everyone to heaven and everything's going to be A-okay, they're not reading their Bible. Because God wants us to make a decision. He needs to have us make a decision, and we have to decide, am I with God or am I without God? Do I need his loving mercy, or do I go my own way? Because God cannot force us into heaven. He will not. He gives us freedom of choice. Freedom of choice. Now, what I'm going to do, of course, because we don't have time to do a full study here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through a few of the chapters in Revelation. So if you don't mind paging with me to chapter 17, I'm going to touch on just the first couple of verses. In chapter 17, we find John, and he says, and there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, come here, or come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a cup in her hand full of the abominations of filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was written the name Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abomination of the earth. And I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. And so here, the angel takes John and he says, here, I'm going to show you why there's going to be a judgment. I'm going to show you why. Look at this system, the spiritual Babylon that has mixed up truth with falsehoods. Look at what it's done, right? And for those of you that are going through the class, we've gone through the book of Revelation and we've gone through the whole history from the apostolic age through the Middle Ages, through the Reform ages and into our modern era. And so I don't have time to go over all of that. But here John is being taken and the angel is saying, okay, I gave you all that information. Let me just give you a glimpse of why this judgment has to happen. And the reason why the judgment has to happen is because God's name has been put on the chopping block by Satan. Because Satan is challenging, and Satan is saying, no, God is not fair and just. No, God is not what he seems to be. So his character is on the witness stand. And the angel is taking John, and he's taking John and he's saying, look, this is why the judgment has to happen. Look at what the system has done. Look at what people are doing because they're letting themselves be driven by this devil, Satan. And so we look at chapter 17 brings us to that call for looking at why the judgment, what she's doing to deserve this judgment. In chapter 18, we read, and after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and earth was lightened with his glory. So what does this angel bring to earth? Does he bring light or does he bring darkness? Huh? Light. So does God allow this Babylonian power to work in a vacuum by itself? No. There's light, right? The message went out to everywhere, right? Everyone. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is come the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Why? Because all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. And the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, that ye receive not of her plagues. So there's a call. There's light. The message is sent out. Everyone has access to it. Even when everything is falling apart and it's a habitation of evil spirits and devils and every foul thing possible, there's still a call to do what? Come out. Come out. And so the responsibility there lies on us to ask ourselves, do I understand this? Do I need to come out of what I'm doing? Now, sometimes we think that this is just for those people out there that don't know anything about God. But is it really? It's for us. It's for us. And so, as we look at this, let's go ahead and page over to chapter 19, because, we've talked about this message. We have to figure out who God is. We have to understand Babylon. We have to understand there's a judgment. We have to see that there's a reason for this judgment. There's a consequence of this judgment. But in chapter 19, we come across the first two verses, and it says, And after these things, I heard great voices of much people in heaven saying, Hallelujah! Salvation and glory and honor and power unto the Lord our God. For true and righteous, what? True and righteous are his judgments. For he hath judged that great whore which did corrupt the earth with her fornication, and hath avenged the blood of his servants at her hand. Because how much blood was spilled throughout the ages by this system? Millions. Some historians put it at 500 million casualties. And so we look at this and we ask ourselves, do I understand who I am as a Seventh-day Adventist? Do I understand who I'm supposed to be as a remnant, Bible-believing Christian? And what is my responsibility? Because there are people out there who don't know. Or there are people out there who don't understand. And perhaps there's someone out there just waiting, just waiting for you to look at them and shake their hand and give them a little bit of hope. At ASI, there was a testimony, and this young lady was, praying and saying, I am so shy, I'm so nervous, I don't know how to witness. But she took a couple of glow tracts, and she got on the train, and she was praying, God, if you just give me the strength, just one glow tract. And she's sitting on the train, and her stop is coming, and she sees this guy in front of him, and she's like, should I give it to him? Should I not? My stop is coming, and the stop comes, and she feels something in her that says, just give it to him. And so she reaches out and gives him a little glow tract, and the guy looks at it, and he looks at her and says, I'm standing here in my mind praying to God to give me one reason why I shouldn't kill myself today. Just one reason. That was it. So, are we letting those moments pass us by where we haven't taken that moment to share? Even if it's a smile, even if it's a small glow tract, even if it's a, can I pray for you? And so what is our mission? Your mission may not be to go to Rwanda and help the refugees there. Your mission may not be to, go across down to the South American continent and help build wells. That may not be your mission. But could your mission be your neighbor, your friend, your family member? Or that random person that you just happen to come across, and all they need is to hear just one positive thing from you. What is your mission? And so as we look at that, I want to transition to this next phase, because if we're going to work, what do we need to do? Can we work if we're feeble? Can we work if we don't have water? Can we work if we don't have nutrition? Can we work if we're not able to work, if we're not physically able to work? So I'm going to read this quote. It is impossible for the brain to do its best work when the digestive powers are abused. The use of unhealthful food and overeating of even that which is wholesome should alike be what? Avoided. Now, some people may say, well, that quote is over 100 years old. Does that matter? Do they even know what they were talking about 120 years ago? Well, so this is 2015. This is from Harvard University. Is that an okay school, Harvard? Low tier? Okay. So Harvard University, Nutritional Psychiatry, Your Brain on Food by Dr. Eva Selhub. So what is that brain full of? Huh? Can you see that? What's in there? We got wholesome foods in there, right? They threw 2 fishes in there. Is there a story about 2 fishes somewhere? So this is from 2015. Now let's listen to what she says. There you go. So she says, think about it. Your brain is always on. It takes care of your thoughts and movements, your breathing and heartbeat, your senses. It works hard 24/7, even while you're asleep. This means that your brain requires a constant supply of fuel. That fuel comes from the foods you eat. And what's in that fuel makes all the difference. Now, I'm going to pause there. There's a significance to that statement, because not too long ago, people would say, it doesn't matter the fuel you put in there. An apple is as good as a Snickers bar. A Twinkie packet is as good as a bag of grapes. But she throws that in there because we know that that's not true. And so she says, and what's in that fuel makes all the difference. Put simply, what you eat directly affects the structure and function of your brain, and ultimately your what? Mood, how we feel, how we behave. Now, she goes on, and a couple more things. I just took a few things out of this for our purposes today. And so she says, today, fortunately, the burgeoning field of nutritional psychiatry is finding that there are many consequences and correlations between not only what you eat, how you feel, and how you ultimately behave. Why? Because it impairs brain function, it causes mood disorders, such as depression. So, if I am going to be a worker of God, and I am going to be into spiritual things, and I want to understand what this message means, can I take the risk of having a poorly functioning brain? A sluggish brain, a confused brain. Because that takes us back to what? Babylon. Do we want to babble on like the Babylonians? No, we don't, right? And so we have to understand this. Now, just one more reference before we move on, from this other school called Harvard T.H. Chang School of Public Health. I'm being facetious. Here it says, it's no secret that the amount of calories people eat and drink has a direct impact on their weight. Now, that may sound like a simple statement. But I was in Europe in 2015 at a conference. And at this conference, I was actually I was at a conference listening to a separate conference. So I was double dipping into two conferences. And so the second conference was talking about how European health is starting to match American health. Because the American food industry has done a great job of killing Americans, and now we're doing a really good job of killing Europeans. And so the Europeans are mad and like, why are we letting the Americans, kill our health? And so in this council, they said, well, the problem is that the big food companies that came to Europe bought the pockets of the politicians in Europe, and they got the politicians in Europe to publish the exact opposite of this statement. Because what they published was, there is no relationship between calories and the foods they're selling and weight and diabetes. And they bought it. And so they opened up the doors to flood the European market with American foods. And so now we are the best and the most effective terrorists in the world. So, he continues, milled refined grains and the foods made with them, white rice, white bread, white pasta, processed breakfast cereals, increase the risk of weight gain, diabetes, and heart disease. There's convincing evidence that sugary drinks increase the risk of weight gain, obesity, and diabetes. And he says that, they say that, because people are out there publishing the opposite. Drink all the Coke you want, you're fine. Even better, have you guys seen the new Diet Coke commercials? With all the flavors and things like that? So if you want to be a diabetic and you want to be overweight, drink the diet drinks, because that's what's going to get you to do. So we ask ourselves, well, why does this matter? Why does it matter? Because, if I'm a healthy Adventist, I'm going to be okay. But is our call to lock up these doors and be a healthy Adventist in this building? No. Because let me show you a graphic. Now, this graphic is from 1993 to 95. So at this point, I was already married and had children. I was already in healthcare. And so this graphic shows that throughout the United States, and this is not a political graph, right, Phil? Where's Phil? It's not a political graph. So all of America was below this blue line right here. Now this is obesity data. So that means that You can go anywhere in America, and the percentages of obesity were pretty low, less than 15%. In some spots, I don't know what this state is here, but in some spots, it was a little higher. Now, let's fast forward to just a couple of years ago. So, if we fast forward to a couple of years ago, again, not political. They just use these colors for whatever reason. So, what happened to the United States? Except for this little spot here and my hometown right here, they're still kind of hanging on between 20 and 25%. But what happened to the rest of the United States? So do we have an epidemic in our hands? And shouldn't we, as remnant people, do something about this and help? Shouldn't we? For ourselves and for the outside? Now, when we click over to diabetes, and excuse me, so we look here. This graph happens to start in 1958. So some of you were down here. Some of us are in here. That means I'm pretty old, I guess. Okay, I'm getting old. But if we draw the line here, right? So Sylvia and I started dating right in between here somewhere. So in my era, so I'm talking about, I was already in healthcare right here. And so look at the spike on this diabetic curve. Do we have a problem in our hands? Yeah, we do. Now, in the previous time I talked a little bit about the statistics, right? And I talked about, how much it's expanded, and I talked about how many people are pre-diabetic. You remember? 1 in how many? 1 in 3. So there are people that are living in pre-diabetes, and you can live there for years and don't even know it. So now in the past, we've done things like, who recognizes this? Anybody recognize that? Okay. All right. So in the past, we've talked about that, right? And we talked about the need for nutrition, and we talked about the need for exercise, and we talked about the need for water, and we talked about the need for sunlight and temperance and air and rest and the need to trust in God. Okay? And so we have to reset. We have to reset ourselves and say, can we go back to doing some of these things? Now, there's a few things I want to transition into, because what I want to do is I want to challenge you as a church. And I'm not going to make an appeal, and I'm not going to make you come up here and I promise to lose 20 pounds in the next 2 weeks. Not going to do that. Not going to do that. But I do want you to give yourself to God and give a pledge to God and say, you know what, God, work in me. And if you're healthy and you're doing all the right things, wonderful. Help others. Participate. Teach, right? And I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But I want you to think of these 5 things. I want you to, first of all, be aware. Do we have a problem? Is it exclusive to just one people? No. And does this problem impact our mental and physical health? And if we have poor mental and physical health, can we be good evangelists? Can we be good missionaries? No. So we need to be aware. We need to be aware there's a problem. If we're not aware, then we are what? Huh? Exactly. So the first step is awareness. The second step is we have to make a plan. We have to commit to action. We have to be accountable. And then, of course, we have to teach others. And so when we talk about being aware, what's your health? What are your numbers? What's your weight? What's your blood pressure? What's your sugar? What's your cholesterol? What's your body mass index? Be aware. What are your numbers? Make a plan. So go back to that New Start philosophy and say, well, am I drinking enough water? Now, you're in Texas, it's hot, you might need to drink more water than what I put up there. So drink water. How about the nutrition? Can I get more raw foods in there? Can I avoid those bad processed carbs that we already talked about? And can I take control in what I'm eating and my portions, and can I make sure I don't skip meals, right? Can I at least get some movements? Can I get up and go? There's a lot of campaigns, right? Get up and go, play 60, all these initiatives out there, because people that are in public health in the United States, they see the incredible burden that this has. And so they're coming up with all kinds of slogans and ideas to get people moving. Just get up and go, play 60, do something. And so what they're saying is the minimum 30 minutes of cardiovascular exercise at least 4 times a week. That's the minimum. And if you monitor your heart rate, then you want to get that heart rate somewhere in the 120-30 zone, because that's going to be a good cardio burn for you. And after you get your body used to doing this odd, weird, strange activity called exercise, then you can add some cross-training, you can add some resistance, you can add some weight, you can do other things to get conditioned. Now, so the next step. So if we're going to be aware and we're going to come up with a game plan, we have to commit to action. So how do we commit to action? Find a partner, team up with somebody, get the family involved, make it something worthwhile. When we go to the next slide here, it's not working for me. Oh, hold on. Can we go back one slide? There you go. So be accountable. So how can you be accountable? Because how many people have started a New Year's resolution? And how many hours, how many weeks? How long did it last? For some, hours. For others, weeks. For a few months, right? But we have to find ways of being accountable. And what I find that works the best is if we have positive reinforcements and we set up short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. And so set reasonable goals that you can attain and reward yourself with positive things, but not what? Food. And what's that last sentence there? Can someone read that for me? I can't tell you how many of my patients tell me, well, but can I have a cheat day? And I say, wait a minute, when you got married, was there a clause in your wedding contract that said you can have a cheat day? Then they look at me like, that makes sense. Why would I want to cheat on something that's good, right? And so don't trick yourself into falling back into bad habits. And so you want to commit. You want to set these short-term goals. Now, with my patients, a short-term goal is 6 weeks. That's short-term. Long-term goal, medium-range goal is 3 to 6 months. Long-term goal is over a year, and the statistics tell us that we have to get to over 18 months to really know that you're achieving a long-term goal. Okay, so we're talking real numbers here. We're not talking, I'm going to lose 60 pounds next month. No, that's not healthy. Even if you could lose it, that is very, very unhealthy. All right, so be accountable. Next step, what do we need to do? Pass it on. Because you're going to have success, you're going to be inspiration, you're going to be able to help others, you can share your success, because sharing is caring, right? So you have to care for others. Now remember, we want to do this in the context not of just nutrition, but what is the real big goal here that we want to look at? What's our mission? What? Preach the message, right? So if we can be examples, if someone can come up to you and say, boy, you've really changed. What did you do? Tell me what you do. Then you can share, you can be an example. Spiritual blessings, physical blessings. I'm going to read this quote from here. It says, those upon whom rest important responsibilities, those above all who are guardians of spiritual interests, should be men of keen feeling and quick perception. More than others, they need to be temperate in eating. And so when we think of the health message, and we think of the three angels message, and we think of the Bible, and we think of the remnant people, and we think of there is a coming judgment. Who believes there's a coming judgment? Some people? Who looks at this world and says, oh, this world is perfect. It's never been better in its history. Are we living with pestilence? Are we living with earthquakes? Are we living with death and destruction? Are we living with wars and rumors of wars? Are we living with pain and suffering? Yes. And so my call to you today is, let's join hands. Let's work together in the spiritual realm, but let's complement that with healthy living. And over the next couple of months, we're going to invite you to come join a cooking class. And we're going to invite you to come talk about how can we naturally lower blood pressure and naturally improve diabetes. And we're going to talk about how can we lose weight and how can we do things better. And so I would invite you to be on the lookout for those sign-up sheets and to talk to us. Talk to Vidya, talk to me, talk to Vicky, talk to the elders. You know, let's work together so that we can merge the remnant and the health message and move forward. And so I'm going to leave you with just one more verse here, a couple of verses from Revelation chapter 21. And it says, "And I saw a new heaven and a new earth." Who wants to see that new heaven and new earth? "For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God. And God shall wipe away all," what? "Tears from their eyes. And there shall be no more," what? "Death. And neither," what? "Neither shall there be any more," what? "Pain. For the former things are passed away." So I invite you to take a moment. And what I want you to do is just where you are, bow your heads, close your eyes. I'm going to pray. And as I pray, I want you to just have a talk with God and commit with him to give you the strength and the energy to move forward in this message. Let's bow our heads.